Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Page One podcast.
First ever episode, Marco.
It is the first episode, so that's an exciting thing for us anyway. I'm not sure about all of you listening. You've just heard an advert there for Page One, which is a notebook designed by writers for writers. I'm Marco Rinaldi.
I'm Tarek Ashkenani.
And we're both aspiring writers, and we hope that notebook will help writers of all descriptions. If you are interested in it, please do check it out. The link's in the bio. It's coming to Kickstarter soon.
Now, each week we're going to speak to a different writer about their writing process, how they come up with their ideas, what they've written and what's next. And we hope that each week you'll learn a little bit more about maybe how to improve your own writing.
It's certainly been educational for us. We've recorded a few of these already. And the first one we recorded was with Gary Moffat, who's a Glasgow-based lawyer, but also a successful crime writer.
He's written 5 books now, the first 4 of which are a Scottish crime stroke action thriller series, very kind of Lee Child.
Yeah, the first of those was Daisychain, which is about a Glasgow-based lawyer, so you might see the similarity with Gary. And we discussed that in the podcast, and there were 4 books in that series, and then his most recent book is Blackwater, which is a bit of a change of pace. It's still a crime novel, but it's set in small-town America, and we discuss how that change came about with Gary as well.
Now, Gary was kind enough to invite us to his office on a rainy February afternoon, and we had a really good time with him, and we hope you guys have a really interesting listen.
We should say as well that we did have some problems with the audio on this one, this being our first podcast and all, but we have cleaned it up as much as possible, and we think it sounds good. We'll be back at the end of the podcast, but in the meantime, enjoy the very first episode of the Page One podcast.
A very fancy office.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Been here for 11 years.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, a long time.
I
suppose what me.
do you want to be there, even though it's kind of like an interview in that? But it's just because the way this thing
Does that
points
work better
mics.
if I'm here, right? Okay.
Yeah.
No worries. Does feel like an interview.
Well, we've all got the same jumper on, so
Exactly.
that's a good start.
Just on Friday, is it?
Yeah, excellent. No, it's good. I always like when I chat about the book. It's a nice sort of break from the real job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think we all suffer from imposter syndrome, but particularly in relation to the books, I suffer from imposter syndrome because, although it was brilliant to have them, and they're still out there, and it never really took off the way that we all want, which is it becomes your full-time career.
Yeah,
and you can do
absolutely.
it. And so I spent 5 or 6 years on the circuit doing Edinburgh Festival and bloody Scotland.
Oh,
and
right,
all that
okay,
kind of stuff.
yeah.
And then it kind of stops a bit, and I did a bit more a year and a half ago with another book that came out, and I can always feel like you're kind of, it's such a different world, they're commercial law world from the book world.
Yeah. I suppose the starting point for us is, you're a lawyer who has also got these books out there. I mean, how did you find the time?
Yeah, I mean, I did it different ways for different books. I kind of found my way a bit. I don't know how other writers do it, but my sense from hearing others on the circuit is that everyone does it differently to suit themselves. So finding the time, I mean, I always interested at school in creative writing essays. I always chose them.
Yeah.
Always had a desire to do it. Loved reading as a kid, as a teenager, as an adult, and I was really, I don't know, I think I was not long after our first daughter was born, so I would have been 31. I just decided I was going to give it a bash, so I went out and I kind of, I suppose like a lot, I'm quite a, you do the personality testing, your reds, your blues, your yellows and your greens, and lawyers are mainly reds and blues. We're very regimented and logical, and I think I'm like that, so I decided to sort of compartmentalise the writing life, so I bought a separate laptop. I thought that'll be my sort of writing machine.
Right, okay, yeah.
And I think I named it that in a kind of cheesy way, like give me your computer name, it was writing machine. And I just decided to sit down and start writing, so did it. It was, I most of the stuff I used to read, I don't read as much as I used to, but most of the stuff I used to read then was American crime fiction. I didn't really read much, if any, Scottish, never mind British stuff. So I set out to write an American crime thriller. Decided I was going to set it in a big city, but one that wasn't that well known for fiction, because then you're not tied to the cliches or so I decided to set it in Denver. There's lots of reasons why I decided to set it there. And while I think we mentioned in our exchanges the write what you know cliche. And I don't totally buy into that at all. Otherwise, no one would ever write science fiction.
No,
for example. But there's something in verisimilitude and appearance of truth or reality. And so I decided that I should really go to Denver if I'm going to write about it, rather than just. And this is 2001, 2003-ish. So, Google Earth wasn't available, and Google Street View wasn't available in the way it is now, where you can see the world. So, and weirdly, I kept all the ticket stubs and hotel bookings for that trip, because it was a big trip for me. I was going to research a book I wanted to write.
Was this after your daughter's born? You went out to Denver?
Yeah. So she must have been 1.5 or something like that. Actually, no, maybe 2 or 3, because I think I was already into the book by the time I decided to go. I think I'd started it and then decided I'm really going to have to go here. And I looked at the tickets a few years ago, and it was like £230 return to Denver, which is to get a flight like that just now would be incredible. But it was off peak, so that probably explained it. So actually, because you're a young kid, it wasn't going to be a family trip. I only wanted to go for sort of a long weekend, even though it's a long way to go for a long weekend. So my dad volunteered to go with me. So me and my dad flew over there. We had an old VHS video camera. I guess it wouldn't have been that old then. It was still technologically sound. And he basically I filmed a lot, and if I was walking around, he would sort of film a bit of me walking around. I'd gotten in touch through the Denver Police Department with a cop over there, a detective sergeant, so I'd exchanged sort of emails with him. We were supposed to meet up, but we never actually managed to meet up while I was there, which was a bit of a bummer. But went to the police station, went round I'd had I bought out of Waterstones a street map of Denver, so in starting to write, I'd sort of plotted out where I thought things were going to happen. So I went to see those spaces to make sure that it looked right and it worked, and then get a better, more vivid sort of physical understanding of them. So that was a brilliant trip. Helped spur on the writing. It took a long time to write that book. I don't know if that was because I wasn't regimented. I was doing it when I kind of had time, or because it was the first go, and that maybe it's always difficult. I don't know.
And I suppose you had a new child at that point as well.
And then another daughter came along in 2004.
Oh, right, okay.
So I eventually finished it. It probably took me a good 3 to 4 years to finish it. So I finished it, I think, 2004 or 5.
Is that first draft or like finish?
Well, come back to the process in a minute, but that first book, I wrote and rewrote it as I went along. I didn't do a first draft and go back to it, and that was a huge mistake. I would never. Well, I don't know how other people work, but I found that hopeless, because you're just constantly reinventing it, and useless for all sorts of reasons. Took forever, but got it in a finished state. Sent it to a bunch of agents. Bought the Writers and Artists Handbook or Yearbook, whatever it's called. If that's still around. Again, sort of largely pre-internet in terms of everything being available. Sent to a bunch of agents. Got a fairly new agent interested, a guy called, I forget his name now, Ampersand Agency it was called. Can't remember his name. I think he's semi-retired now. He liked it, identified some things to change about it, but said, well, why don't I sort of go out to publishers anyway? So did that. Got a bit of interest from one who said it wasn't really there, but we liked the writing. He came back to me and said, look, rewrite that. Here's all the things that I think you need to change, and we'll have another go. So I rewrote it, sent it back to him. He didn't actually like it that much, but I said, well, you've got one on the hook. Would you go and see how you got on with that? Went back to them. They sent it to an external reader and said, really, really liked it, but it's just not quite there. So that was process of writing the first one.
And how many agents did you sort of carpet bomb? Or
No, so identified the ones that listed as crime thrillers.
Yes.
Yeah.
You want to be specifically targeted
Yeah, yeah.
because they don't all
No.
they don't all do that. So it was probably no more than 10 to 12
Right.
something
Okay,
like that.
cool.
I know the others rejected it, or didn't come back.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he was the only one. So yeah, so it's very much the first one was finding my feet in terms of when I did it, how I did it. I hadn't did I plan that one out? I didn't plan that one out, so I was just doing it off the top of my head. I found that wasn't good for me either. So that was the first one was really definitely a case of finding your feet and experimenting with things.
Yeah,
that worked
exactly.
and
The
didn't
learning
work.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so to the extent that for the sort of latter half of the book, because the writing and rereading and rewriting and the non-planning part of it, or process that I'd adopted was just wasn't working. For the second part, I wrote down actually a really very detailed sort of page by page almost
Okay.
plan for writing it, and that helped me get through it.
Yeah.
The agent came back to me and said, right, that's not working, that's an American book, difficult to sell from a British author, why don't you write something here?
Yeah.
And I wasn't really into that, but I think you should take advice from the people you're, from the professionals.
Yeah.
So I took his advice, decided to write something set here, and that was the first one that got published, Daisychain.
Okay.
And again, I learned a lot from the first one. So going into Daisychain, I decided I would plot it from the beginning. Not quite as detailed as that last one, because I found that a wee bit inhibiting, the sort of page by page almost. So I plotted sort of event by event and characters and stuff. I became more regimented in terms of writing, so because with the two kids by that stage, the way we worked it was my wife didn't work at that point, so I would come home, I would feed them, the kids together, I would then give them their bath so that, A, my wife got a break, and B, I was, interacting with them. And then once that was done, I would maybe 3 nights a week, plus usually sort of Sunday afternoon was a big writing time for me. I would say, right, 8:30, 9 o'clock, I'm away up to the study, I'm going to do a few hours.
Yeah.
And that worked, and then I would do Sunday afternoon a good block, I would do holidays, and that was a much better way of doing it. I didn't choose the same day every week, so it wasn't like I'll do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It was just I'll try and do 2 or 3 days a week plus the weekend.
you didn't wait for inspiration or something like that before you sat down to write?
No, I mean,
you'd sort of
and there'd
plot
be
it out.
times when you would sit down,
Yeah.
and even though I had it plotted out, you'd still sit down and look at the page for a bit and go, I'm not sure where I'm going with this. And actually, I was going to say the technique I found that worked for me at least was go back and read the previous 2 or 3 chapters.
Yeah.
Just get your head back
Into that mode of
and and then once you start, you may start slow, it starts to come again. And there were times when it was really slow, and I would do a couple of hours and just, it's not working tonight. And there's times where I'd sit down and I'd still be writing at 1 a.m. because you're in the flow.
Is that quite an important thing, you think, having that time to say I'm going to sit down for 2 hours and I'm going to write, and whether or not I get a lot or not a lot, I'm going to make sure I have that space to actually try and write something.
For me, definitely, because the experience with the first one was not like that. It was just whenever I decided. So I'd go weeks without doing anything,
Right.
and it just took too long. And in the context of a commercial book rather than a literary book, you need to deliver on a time scale.
Yeah.
You don't have the luxury of taking 10 years to write a book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think for me the regiment definitely worked. Yeah.
Okay. And then what happened after that? So you had your book finished, and then what happened at that point?
Yeah. So finished that. So that took maybe a year and a half. It was much quicker, much better process. Sent the draft to the agent. He didn't like it.
Oh, right.
I don't know why. I mean, it was odd that it was an immediate sort of, I don't like that. There's these things missing with it, and the things that he didn't like about it were just, as it turned out, because it got published, just things that an editor would fix.
Yeah.
There was nothing significant. It wasn't about the style of writing or anything.
Had you told him what the plot was or anything before that?
No, I just landed it on him.
Just
Yeah,
landed it.
he knew I was doing something
Yeah,
based here, but I don't think I sent him. I might have sent him a synopsis, but I'm not sure if I did or not.
And was it very similar to the first book you'd written, or was it just set here, or was it really a totally different feel of a book?
No, different feel.
Right.
Yeah, quite different, I think. I mean, still crime thriller, but yeah, different enough. Yeah. So I said to him, well, okay, that's fine. We will just part ways if you don't like it.
Okay.
But you had that one editor who liked the first one. Can you remind me of her contact details? And I'll go to her. And any of the others that showed a sort of vague interest in the writing of the first one. So he gave me, I think, 3 or 4. One was the editor. Can't remember which publishing house she was at. Gave me another one. Can't remember the name of it. And he gave me the name of the one that eventually took it. So that was Bob McDevitt, who just set up Hachette Scotland. So that was a new division of Hachette, which is Headline and Order and lots of different ones. So I sent it to all of them. I think the woman that liked the first one didn't like this one. And I think the other ones had come back to me other than Bob and said no. So, and it must have been a good 4 or 5 months, I think. And I'd kind of just stopped at that point because I thought, well, it's not happened. Actually, I'd taken up trying to learn guitar because I'd always wanted to do that. I thought, well, I'm not writing, so I'll do something else that'll keep me interested. So it was a good few months. And I was coming back from a conference in Edinburgh, I think it was at Dynamic Earth, and there was a message on my phone, just say Bob McDevitt. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I listened to that voicemail. He said, give me a phone. Phoned him. I'd only sent him, the standard sort of 3 chapters or something, synopsis. He really liked it. He said, he was looking for a thriller because it was a new imprint. He wanted a kind of variety of different books. And this was, it'd been sitting at the bottom of the pile, and when he thought it was just going to be another sort of rubbish Scottish crime thriller, he picked up and he liked that it wasn't. So sent him the whole thing. He liked that. I mean, he identified initially a lot of the things that the agent hadn't liked about it or wanted to change. But Bob was a publisher rather than editor, so although he had a kind of buyer's eye for it, it was going to be an editor. Because Hachette in Scotland didn't have any other resource really other than Bob. He was being resourced from Hachette in London, so it was an editor in London that was assigned.
I mean, that's quite an unusual route, isn't it? Though, that you
Going
effectively
direct.
got picked up by an agent.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, that was more than 10 years ago, so I don't know if that route would be open now. I think it probably is more open now. Actually, I think the internet has opened things up, and I think self-publishing's opened it up, and a whole bunch of good, bad, and indifferent writers are much more belligerent and aggressive about getting in touch with publishers. And publishers, no doubt, still like the sift that an agent gives them because it avoids all the crap. And I've seen, having been published, other people said, "Oh, I know someone who's writing a book. Can I send it to you?" So I did that a couple of times, and it gets you nowhere because if it's not good and you tell them it's not good, they get upset and they say, "I'm going to get it published because I think it's great." And so you may as well just not do that. So
everyone thinks they've got a book in them.
Exactly. It's and they do. It's whether it's any good or not.
Exactly.
It's quality over
bad thinking, exactly.
Yeah, and there's some complete dross out there.
So Bob picked.
So Bob picked it up,
yeah.
got the whole thing, got an editor on board. So yeah, I mean, you probably know. I don't know if everyone will know, but so the editor is the story editor rather than the copy editor. So you get a story editor, then once you get the story right, it goes to the copy editor who does all the grammar and stuff that you've done wrong. So the story editor, and again, I didn't know going into this, but doesn't write or change anything for you. Just give you some notes, have a conversation about what's good or bad, what they'd like you to address, go away. I think in adding and taking away, I think we ended up with a book that was 30,000 words longer. It was quite a big edit.
Wow.
Much more so than any other one. But again, I think that was that was part of the learning process again of they wanted. I mean, just in terms of going to the market, they wanted something that was a bit bigger.
Yeah.
There's nothing more than that. They wanted a bit of volume and add the other things. And it just so happened that all the stuff I was able to add brought it up to about 100,000 words. So they were fine with that. Got to copy edit, started getting into cover design, and that ended up getting published, yeah. And so that was a 2-book contract for not a lot of money at all, but I was getting published, so brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
it got quite.
It was
coverage.
great, yeah. It was so good. I thought I was going to end. I thought I was going to next year in rank, and I was going to retire from the law because it got. Bob did a brilliant job of getting interviews with the Scotsman and the Herald and Evening Times and the Skinny and all sorts of places. Great pieces there. Getting booksellers interested. We had a big launch at iWrite. I think it was 200 people in the Mitchell Library. I had a big list of sort of clients and contacts and friends and family. And I think it started first week. It ended up in the Herald's top 10 hardbacks.
Brilliant.
Got a great review in the Daily Mail, an absolute stonker. It ended up sort of getting in Amazon. It was like in this top sort of couple of hundred for a week or so, which is actually pretty
hard to do.
significant.
Yeah, definitely.
You're still not selling tons and tons of books at that, but it's selling. So
Yeah.
they were really happy. Bob said he'd not had any experience of selling a Scottish crime writer overseas, and we got some again, not tons of money, but we sold to Poland, Serbia, Turkey, Germany.
Wow.
It was a random house. It was called Bland Valet that picked it up in Germany. We thought that was going to be pretty big. They picked up the first 3. So the first experience was, this is amazing. It quickly went into profit. I mean, I think Daisychain, the earnings from Daisychain bought out the advance for Daisychain and the second book pretty quickly.
That is quite unusual, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but because I hadn't negotiated, I just got a crappy advance. So it didn't do that much. But yeah, it was a really great platform.
Yeah.
I had a chat about the next book. I was going to do something different. He said, well, crime, people like the same characters, do series. I was like, well, I'm up for that because that's the kind of stuff I read. Yeah. So kind of repurposed an idea I'd had for the second book. And I think that actually, in retrospect, that's where I made the mistake in terms of career progression. So it was a direct sequel.
Okay.
You really had to have read Daisychain. And I don't think that was the right thing. So while you have continuing series, you've always got to sort of restart for the next one because someone might pick it up. It's like you pick up the third book without knowing it's the third book because they're not numbered like graphic novels. And off you go. So and that never took off. It didn't even sell, I don't think. So it probably sold maybe as well as these, probably not quite as well. And the foreign sales, some of those had been sort of, we'll take the first 2 books, so they were picked up with audio books with sort of large print. So it was still going fine to the extent, and because it had out-earned the contract, they wanted to have another one. So I think we were at Edinburgh Festival after the second book was published, or just before it was going to be published maybe. So they'd seen that I'd been able to deliver another commercial manuscript within a year because that was the time scale for the contract. So they knew that I was capable of being a professional commercial writer. So they came.
How did you do that as a lawyer and doing that?
Well, that was just a bit more focused. So Daisychain's about a year and a half. So that was just a bit more of a focused effort. So I found I could write. I then found that the next 3 books, which were contracted, I could write in 9 or 10 months. The first draft, edit in a couple of months, so it's out in a year because that was the contract. So. You know what it's like being a lawyer. You give them a deadline and you work to the deadline.
Yeah, absolutely.
So actually, working without a deadline was no use for me. Once I got a deadline, I was like, "Oh right, okay, I better start."
Pressure was what you needed to keep you going.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's go on it. So I needed that focus. So it was just a more intense version of the first one, which is just speed it up a bit, write more often. Again, it was kids are in bed. It's night time. It's weekends. It's holidays. So I mean, you're sacrificing.
Watching rubbish TV.
Watching rubbish
TV.
or reading it, or reading a book.
Yeah.
And you sacrifice a bit of time sacrifice time with my wife. I would always say, right, I'm going to go and do that. Is that all right? And, she was happy for me to do that, maybe more than happy. She would get peace and quiet. So, and I used to have this kind of almost stock answer because the first question you always get is, where did you find the time to do it?
Yeah.
And my stock answer, which I think is actually the right answer, is, well, do you go to the gym? Do you watch TV? Do you read? Do you ski? Do you play tennis? Do you play five-a-sides? Well, when you're doing that, I'm writing.
Yeah.
It's just a hobby like anything else. So when somebody thinks about, I could never fit that into my life, what they're saying is, I could never fit that into my life with everything else, the same that I do right now.
Yeah.
Well, you can't, of course. You've got to make a sacrifice. Something's got to give.
I suppose it's writing's slightly more difficult for some people because it's a solitary thing, first of all, so it's not like five-a-side or something like that, and it doesn't come easy sometimes.
I think that's right, depending on your personality.
Yeah.
I think I've found despite the fact I'm a big commercial law firm and head of the division and been to all these festivals, I think I've found that I'm naturally introverted, and I have to work hard at projecting outwardly for business development and everything else. So you work at that, you train at that, and you get better at it. So actually writing was good for me because I don't mind my own company. I quite like being solitary, and actually our families we're all kind of the same. So the weekend now that the girls are older, Kay'll sort of sit in the kitchen and get her iPad set up and with her cup of tea, and I'll go to the living room and watch some rubbish on Netflix, and the girls will be up in the room. So we, and then we'll come together at night and we'll eat or we'll go out. So it suited me, and I think the training, studying at school, studying at uni, being a lawyer, I think all of that builds in resilience about whether the product is any good or not.
Yeah.
Because I've been through school, I succeeded. I've been through uni, I succeeded. I've become a lawyer. I've come to this firm. I'm succeeding here. Became a partner here in 2004. So I knew that I could succeed at things in life.
Yeah.
So it gave me the confidence
So
that
just go for it. Just try.
I'm going to sit there and I'm going to do it. And I've already been. At this stage, I'm published. So I suppose to some extent you're like, right, I can just do this.
Yeah.
And I will just sit down and I will do it. And I know that if I sit down on any particular night and it's not working, I'll just close the laptop and I'll go away. I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
A kind of blind faith in yourself.
No, that's good though. I think you need that.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you do need that.
I think you need confidence. Yeah. To an extent, you need confidence.
Yeah, and I suppose once you get published and you've got a few books out, you kind of know, I can do it. I just need to sit down and actually do it.
Yeah, and that's the flip side of the confidence that Hachette had once I'd delivered the second book, that he can do it. Mm-hmm. So I know I can do it.
Exactly.
They know I can do it. So they say. So I think we were at Edinburgh Festival. Bob was there, the pretty senior figure from London who'd just joined Hachette, came up, we met. I think she was just getting the measure of me, which I didn't realise. I thought she was just off the festival, but I think Bob said after she was sort of taking your temperature there. And they offered me another 2 books with more money, and so off I went with another 2 books over another 2 years, so 1 a year.
Fantastic.
And by that stage it was much more streamlined, so I'd worked out that I wasn't good free form, I wasn't good within the strictures of too much of a plan, and so it was a kind of hybrid of have some notes, have some ideas, have something down on paper, but allow your ability to flow within that, to be there. So and that I ended up working best for me.
And did you have a overarching storyline or something that you wanted for Logan Finch?
Yeah. So there were 2 things. So Daisychain Logan started as a lawyer. I mean, he was very much a kind of more exciting, dynamic, better looking version of me. But with Cahill and the close protection team, the idea was always that Logan would join that team, so it would fall out. He became their sort of in-house lawyer, but the idea was always that he would become a bodyguard, so it would become that kind of series. And I'm sure I mentioned this in one of the festivals I was at, that I initially thought of Logan as being the sort of do-all hero, and I thought that's not very realistic, a Scottish lawyer. I mean, as much as I might think I'm amazing, I'd get my head kicked in pretty easily if things started to go down somewhere. Because he was going to be ex-army or something.
Right.
Just trying to do too much with that. So I'm a big fan of Robert Crace's books, Elvis Cole and Joe Pike. I don't know if you've read them. So he's got a private detective called Elvis Cole, been around for decades now probably, and he's got a sort of, and he's very handy himself, but he's got a mate who's sort of special forces called Joe Pike, who does all the real dirty work. And I thought, well, it's going to be a 2-hander then. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's how I came to split it with Logan and with Cahill as well.
Because when I read them, I think the thing that I really thought of was especially the first one. The first half of it seems like a kind of a lawyer, police investigation kind of procedural feel to it, and then the latter half it really leans into this kind of Lee Child type vibe,
Yeah.
and it kind of goes into more of an action vibe.
Yeah.
And that was I didn't expect it to go in that way, and it was really quite good to read.
Yeah.
And is that the kind of stuff you like to read yourself? Is that the kind
Oh
of
yeah,
where you got the idea from?
yeah. I mean, Crace is a bit like that. It's quite,
Yeah.
it's a PI thing. There's a lot of action in it. I love a bit of Jack Reacher, Don Winslow, James Elroy, Michael Connolly. Britain and Scotland has got a brilliant tradition of the procedurals, Ian Rankin and Agatha Christie and
Laidlaw.
Yeah, Laidlaw, of course, Kilmarnock based or Born of Mahomany. But and I like those fine, but I don't really read them, and I don't really like whodunits. So you notice, really none of my books are whodunits.
Yeah.
You kind of know who the protagonists are. It's just so it's a much more American style of book than British tradition. So while Daisychain started that way, that was deliberate. It was always going to pivot to let's go mental. And I think and some people like the fact that halfway through it becomes a totally different book, and some people hated the fact that halfway through it becomes a totally different
I
book.
can imagine that. Yeah.
I liked it.
I liked it a lot as well. Definitely. Yeah.
And I had more latterly than then, but not from the book, but from the Hunt for Red October movie. And so they talk about the Russian submarines doing Crazy Ivans, which means they stop dead and turn around very quickly to see if they've been followed. And one of the agents, I got in touch with some other agents latterly, and one of them talked about, like my sort of, I can't remember what he called it, was it audacious plot twists or something in the one he was reading, and so I kind of focus on that, sort of try to keep your audience off balance. Yeah. And I think Daisychain was the start of that, with that halfway through it pivots to something completely different.
It does have that feel of like the chapters are quite short, it's very pacey, there's always something happening, end on a cliffhanger. It does have that forward pace that just keeps you going through it, and that's what just happened. It becomes more actiony. It's because you spent time, as you say, from the bad guy's kind of point of view, that it just builds really nicely to the climax. So it's definitely a good way to write a book, I think. That
interestingly, there was no bad guy's perspective in the first draft. That was one of the things the agent hated. Yeah,
really?
I was like, I'm not interested in them. I'm interested in the good guys. He said, no, you need that. You need the motivation. You need the balance. You need something in there. And it turned out he was right, and the editor had the same view. But short chapters was the thing I always love. I hate long chapters because I feel like I've got to get to the end of a chapter. So something's 25 pages long and it's midnight. I'm like, oh God. So short, punchy. All about that. It was about I'm not the best writer by a million miles, but I think I can tell a propulsive story.
Absolutely,
I can do that, and so that's what I aim to do. Yeah.
I read Blackwater, which is obviously the different.
Yeah.
It's the American set one.
Yeah. Finally got to.
Finally got to it. Yeah, exactly. And that as well, it has very much all of those things, but sort of building up these different threads. You're seeing the short chapters from different people's point of views until it all comes together at a climax. So it's for a thriller. I think it's a great. Short chapters in a thriller, I think, are great because they do the end in a cliffhanger. They're building up the tension each time.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't done any studying of creative writing or anything, but I only read bits and bobs about it. But one thing that stuck in my mind, and I can't remember where I picked it up from, was in a book like that a book of the type that I liked reading and writing, you needed conflict every 5 or 10 pages. Now that didn't mean someone would pull a gun. It didn't mean actual conflict. It just meant conflict between characters or actual conflict. So you had to have something rubbing against something else fairly quickly, and I found the best way for me to do it was to do that chapter based, so short chapters, so that you say, right, I've stopped there, I need conflict in this one, whatever that conflict might be. I just found that, again, it was that compartmentalising, that sort of lawyer, that sort of logical way of constructing things.
What took you to Blackwater after the Logan Finch ones? What made you change? Because you'd always wanted to write that type, that's where you liked reading, so you always wanted to write that American.
Well, I scratched it a wee bit in Protections to the last Finch book because I didn't know where to go with the end of that, the end of the American end of that, so it's half and half in London and Colorado, and it came to me sort of fairly late on that actually where I was really heading was almost repurposing the book that never got published, which was putatively titled Wolf Creek.
Right.
Before the movie Wolf Creek was out. I was ahead of the game because it was based in Colorado, Denver. So the detective character, Jake Hunter, he was actually the lead in Wolf Creek. So I put him into protection, not with the view of repurposing Wolf Creek, but as I got towards the end of it or halfway through it, I thought actually that whole sort of back end of Wolf Creek is really where I'm going. So I repurposed a fair chunk of that, not lazily, because I always liked that book, and I always thought maybe somewhere down the line it'll get published, and I thought actually I can do it here. So I took a chunk of that. So the sort of end part of that, I guess people might want to read the books that are listening to this. I won't give away the ending, but when they go to the house eventually in the town and what they find there and all of that stuff, and the FBI coming into it, that's all Wolf Creek stuff.
Okay.
And the Agent Graves is a Wolf Creek character, and his relationship with Hunter, that's all Wolf Creek. So
That's interesting.
yeah, 10 years later I was able to get it published. Sort of.
But that does show as well that, I mean, everyone always says that you should never wipe away stuff you've done, because it will sit there, and no matter how long it takes, there will be something usable that you can take from that later on, and it's obviously true.
And
It's absolutely true in that case.
Does early Sims exist in the same world as
No.
Logan Finch?
Totally. So that was totally different. So yeah, that was the question you asked. Good to get me back on track. You're a good lawyer. You're taking my examination, Chief, right? So protection got finished. I had I'd re-engaged an agent by that stage. He turned out to be rubbish. So my two experiences of agents have been very poor, and my experience of publishers have been very good. So I'm obviously the opposite of most writers.
Yeah.
Most writers love their agents and they hate their publishers. I've got no time for agents. I think they're useless. Parasites taking 20% for them, bugger all.
Tell us what you really think about it.
I'm sure yours is nice and good and helpful. Yeah, my experience is atypical. So he helped get protection. So Hachette Scotland was struggling at this point. They were going to shut it down. He helped get protection repositioned, so it was published under the headline banner. So I thought that was important because it might get more traction. It turned out they weren't putting anything behind it because I think they'd written me off by this stage. And the best route he thought in was a new book to my existing editor there to see if they would take it on. But during the process, so I'd met 3 agents. I'm down to London for a day. I'd got 3 agents interested. So this was, Blindside had been published. Protection was pretty much done.
So that's the third, just for
Blindside's the third
book.
Protection was the 4th book. I knew my contract wasn't getting renewed, or they hadn't offered me anything. So I'd sort of got in touch with a bunch of agents, said, right, I'm a published author, I can do this, I'm professional, I'm a lawyer, I'll model client. I'm looking for the next stage of my career. I got 3 interested, went down, saw them. And it was actually one of them, I can't remember which one it was, said to me, the way your Finch books went, they were getting sort of bigger and bigger and bigger. Daisychain was local, Fallout was local but expanding, Blindside went to America, and Protection was getting really expansive in terms of London and Colorado and everything. And he or she said, so you can you've either got to go bigger, or you've got to go right back and go smaller.
Okay.
And said, your existing books, the rights will stay with the publisher, so if you're not being published by them, you probably have to do something new to go somewhere else. So that really, after thinking about it, solidified I wanted to do something new, something smaller. I didn't want to go bigger. I would have gone bigger with Finch and Cahill if they'd continued, because that was the plan. I had a plan for another book, but that wasn't going to happen. So I thought, right, I'll go small town American noir. That's what I wanted to do. Nowhere near the writing quality. James Lee Burke, his sort of, I don't know if you read his Robichaud book set in Louisiana, amazing, what a writer. But it was that kind of thing, or even, God forbid, Elmer Leonard, that kind of smaller town, cast of lots of characters. As a classic Elmer Leonard, everyone coalesces at I Get Shorty or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Maximum Bob or any one of them. So decided to do that. I think I know I can't do an Elmer Leonard or a Carl Hyacin or a funny gothic crimey thing. I knew I had to go sort of serious. That's my kind of thing. So no, Early Sims was Where did he come from?
Where did the name come from?
Yeah, the name I know where it came from. I was trying to think of the character. The name, so...
The early Sims is the main... He's the deputy sheriff who's the main character of Blackwater.
Correct, yeah. So, I love the fact you get these weird and wonderful names in American crime fiction and in cinema. So I wanted to kind of try and embrace that a wee bit. So I'm a big fan of American football. So he's a combination of two American footballers. So there's an American footballer. They're both retired, long retired. I think he was a wide receiver for Atlanta. He was called Early Doucette, which is a great character name of itself.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
a Roboshow. That's a James Lee Burke character name, Early Doucette. And I thought, no, well, he's going to be. I'm a as white as can be Scotsman, so he's going to be a white person. So Early Doucette sounds a wee bit Cajun or something. It's just not going to work. So, and then I think I was flicking through a bunch of names, and there's an old New York Giants quarterback who'd won a Super Bowl called Phil Simms, and he had a son who was a quarterback called Chris Simms. And I thought Early Simms kind of works. I quite like that, and so that's where the name came from.
It sort of influenced the character then as well, because there's the football aspect of Early as well.
Yeah, and that book was, I starting with a synopsis of what that book, or the plot of what that book might be, was about a man who knows about violence and is capable of violence, and therefore, when placed in a world of violence from other men, is able to handle himself, but actually tried to be a bit more sort of philosophical. Sounds kind of wanky, but if I can say wanky on your podcast, just something with a little bit more to it than the kind of straightforward commercial propulsiveness of the other books. So it was about someone who's steeped in violence, has been in the early part of his life traumatized by violence, but is in a violent career. He's a cop, so it was trying to deal with all of that. So yeah, the football played into it because he has that traumatic experience, comes from playing football when he's a teenager, and in this case, I wanted him to be a Logan and Cahill amalgam. He had to be able to handle it all himself. Yeah. So it was most obvious that it would make him a cop. And if you make him of a certain size and physicality, so he played football, so all of that worked perfectly for what I wanted him to be. And that book, probably more than the others, was a bit more free flowing. I didn't plan a lot of that. I mean, I knew I wanted the main protagonist, the Cain brothers. I knew I wanted sort of spree killers. That was the idea behind that. But all the other stuff kind of came. The issues with the sheriff, the sort of abusive husband issue with his ex-girlfriend, that all just kind of came out of the right. I need a cast of characters. I need lots of things to then coalesce together. So they all came out of that. So the initial idea was single character, physicality embodied in a single man, capable himself, the violence around him, the two men being the spree killers. But I didn't think that was enough for what I wanted to do. So I needed to bring all the other stuff in. But that was much less planned.
It reminded me of, rather than comparing to books, but of sort of aspects of it reminded me of Justified as well.
I love Justified.
It had that sort of setting, albeit not in the same sort of area as Justified, but that same sort of setting.
Yeah, I suspect Justified, if only subconsciously, definitely influenced me. I thought that was an amazing TV show, and of course based on an Elmore story to begin with. So I'm sure that must have influenced me back then when I started out writing that. And bearing in mind that I started Blackwater pretty quickly after I finished Protection. So that was only published in 2017. I think I finished it in 2013 or 14.
Oh, okay.
So it was written a while ago, so it was probably sort of peak Justified, sort of first couple of seasons. So all of that, and somebody, it was one of the book bloggers that reviewed it, talked about it being a sort of modern day Western, and that's very much the feel of it. Although he wears a baseball cap, I didn't want to have a cliche of him wearing a Stetson. I thought that's just going too far. Perfectly fine for Timothy Oliphant and Justified, but too much for Cape Cod. That's definitely the modern day Western was part of it.
And what was your experience then selling Blackwater compared to the first 4 books? Because obviously it's set in America.
Yeah.
Did you try and market it in America? Was it difficult to know where to sell it?
Well, what was the publishing situation then?
Yeah, so that got published by Fahrenheit Press, which is an independent So that was an interesting process. So I finished that book when I still had the agent. He tried to get it placed with Headline, and they didn't want it, and he just lost interest. He wasn't interested in pushing it anywhere else, and eventually he just started ghosting me, which millennials will understand. I had to look it up, and so I binned him. And I just got fed up for a bit, so for a couple of years I didn't really do anything with it. I just thought, I wrote it and I wanted to write it, so that's fine. And then a couple of years later, I think I just come back around to thinking, why not try and get that published? And I wrote it and it's good. I went back and reread it and thought, no, it's good. Might even be the best in terms of the writing of any books that I've written. So I got sort of feel reasonably active on Twitter, which I started when not for legal stuff, it was for writing really, to sort of promote that. And I went to the Harrogate Crime Festival, which is a big crime festival down in England, towards the end of my sort of Headline career, and hung out with the Headline sort of PR people who were all sort of young, enthusiastic, loved books, frighteningly young and enthusiastic, and had a couple of nights with them and a couple of days with them, and so I'd followed them all on Twitter at that time. So I went, and their careers had all changed. So one of them, a woman called Sam Eads, I noticed had become a commissioning editor. She'd moved from Headline, gone somewhere else, can't remember where, and become a commissioning editor. So I DM'd her on Twitter and said, hey, do you remember me? We spent those couple of days with the gang. I've got a new book. Do you fancy it? She said, well, it's not really my thing. I always thought you were a good writer. It's not really my thing. Here's some people to try. And it was some agent. It was a mixture of agents and a mixture of indie publishers. Presumably on the basis that it's easier to go to the indies direct than it is with it, because I said I didn't have an agent. So I put together, it was another kind of pitch like professional writer, I'd done it before, he's written books, went to a couple of agents, quite a narrow list, maybe 4 or 5, sent it to I can't remember if I just sent it to the one publisher, to Fahrenheit, I can't remember. And that guy, the guy that runs that guy, Chris, I can't remember his second name now, such an interesting character, had spent time in publishing, he's Scottish, he's from Glasgow.
Right, okay.
Had spent time in publishing over here, had gone over to America, to Silicon Valley, had made some money in software, I think it ended up being, or it became some more in the marketing side of it. Kind of semi-retired, decided he wanted to do something in publishing, so set up Fahrenheit on his own, I think self-funded it. It was all about crime and noir, so I emailed him and
Chris McVie,
that's right, yeah. Got an immediate response from him saying, what a coincidence, I loved your Cahill books, as he called them.
Yeah.
I'll totally publish this, no bother.
Oh, fantastic.
Send it to me. Send it to him, and that's where that ended up. Because it's independent, it was just a one-off, no contract for anything else. He's just happy to publish it. It's ebook, print on demand on Amazon if you want it. It got some real great traction with some book bloggers. A couple of them put it in their best top 10 books of 2017 and made a few £100 out of it. And I thought, I'll write something else, but I wouldn't want to write something else different. I didn't plan on doing Early Sims as a sort of ongoing thing. I kind of felt like I'd scratched that itch with that book. And a bunch of ideas, sat down, maybe the tail end of 2017, Christmas 2017 probably, sat down when I was at home, started to write. Again, it would have been a standalone thing, but my heart wasn't in it, and I just wasn't feeling it, so stopped. And so I've been coming around to thinking sort of lately I might have a bash at a second Early Sims book, because actually when I go back and look at it, I think I did a good job with that, and
it's definitely
the character's good.
World, I think that's right. It's definitely there's more stories to tell.
Oh, totally, yeah. So, and I had an idea for so before that got published and after I'd written it, I did have an idea for a sort of second book. So I'm sort of toying with that idea. It just in the interim period, since becoming a partner here, and then I went on the board for 3 years. I'm now head of the division. Family was growing up. Once you stopped the sort of regimented way of doing it, suddenly when I thought about going back to doing it, I started thinking like everyone else thought, was like, where will I find the time to do that? Yeah. And actually, I got into the habit of enjoying just sort of vegging and Netflixing and going to the cinema, and the thought of doing it again it began to. I began to think of it. So when I was published, even through writing Blackwater, so that had been 2007-8 through to 2014. So that's like 6-7 years. It never felt like a job. It just felt like a hobby that had blown up. But when I thought about it again, having been off of it for 3 or 4 years, I thought it felt like I was going back to a job, and that just wasn't attractive.
Yeah.
But now I'm starting to. People keep asking me. I mean, everyone's so interested in it because it's much more interesting than being a lawyer. When's your next book? What are you doing? And I really like them. And so the more I hear people talk about them and ask me about them, the more it gets me interested again. But and my oldest daughter's maybe going to university this year, so life is starting to change again. And I thought I might not write again until I retire, but I'm starting to sort of get back into the thinking of
good.
Maybe I'll do another one of those.
Should we wrap up with a few rapid fire questions?
All right.
It's a one or the other type situation. So, first one is Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Star Wars, okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
I like them both.
What pushed you towards the Star Wars?
Probably, well, it was first for me, so pretty sure I saw Star Wars before I saw either Star Trek on TV or Star Trek the movie, I think. So I'd have been, 7 when the first one came out?
Yeah.
It's just a childhood thing, it's just loved
Yeah,
it.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, never mind, the prequels have killed everyone's
No.
idea.
That's also true, exactly.
Marvel or DC?
I'm not one of those who picks between them, so either.
Okay.
If you looked at the stuff in my loft and on my shelf, it's probably more DC. But there's quite a lot more indie if you count Image and Aftershock and all those as indies. Then, yeah. But no, wouldn't choose between either.
TV or cinema?
Cinema. I sometimes go myself if there's movies that I want to see and nobody else wants to see. And when I sit down and it's like me and 2 other people on a Tuesday night, I love it. And and
You're not there to chat to anyone. It's always
just love it. I mean, we've got a 65-inch OLED and surround sound at home, so I can shut the blinds and it's great, but it's not as good. It's not
No, I know there is definitely something about being about filming in the cinema which you can't quite capture.
Something like Blade Runners.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah.
Real book or e-book?
I bought so I'll not give you the answer first. I bought a Kindle for the first time last year to go on holiday. I don't really read that much anymore. I just don't find it time. So I put 4 or 5 on it. I read Justin Cronin's The Passage.
Oh yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah, which I really liked. Started watching the TV show actually. It was okay.
Yeah,
very different.
So far.
Yeah, but I also read this guy's name Afterlife, Marcus Saki, I think.
Oh,
I didn't really like it that much. And I do wonder if the format doesn't quite do it for me, so I'm going to say paper book, real book.
And what's the last film you watched?
Ooh, does that need to be cinema or TV or
Anything?
Anything. Jeez, probably at the weekend I watched Upgrade.
Oh right, is that the first person view film?
No, it's by Lee Wannell, who did.
Was it the guy? His kind of body.
He gets his body is he's a paraplegic and he gets a chip.
That's right. Yeah.
And it can make him walk again, but he's not in control of it. It was really good.
Is
It's
it good?
like a totally.
Yeah.
It's a B movie.
B movie, yeah, exactly.
But it's a cracking wee B movie. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So that was a really interesting chat with Gary, we thought.
Yeah, fantastic.
It had an interesting route into publishing.
Yeah, they often say you shouldn't approach publishers directly, but he seems to have broken the rule on that one. It's done him well.
Yeah, and he had some interesting views about agents there.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure he'll be getting a new agent anytime soon. And Tarek, tell me, what is it about this Star Wars you like?
Well, Marco, I think any true fan will tell you that The Star Wars is the official name for the first film.
Okay, the definite article is a must there, clearly. Have you been up to anything good recently?
I've been reading a really good book by Adrian J. Walker called The End of the World Running Club. He's actually a featured guest on our podcast. It's a great kind of mashup of a post-apocalyptic end of the world story, but set in Scotland. That's quite unusual. I've not read one like that before, so I'm finding it great.
Yeah, I read it recently as well because Adrian's going to be on the podcast, and it is a brilliant book, brilliant read, highly recommend it. Obviously we'll discuss it more when Adrian's here, but I suppose the log line for it would be The Walking Dead set in Edinburgh,
Yeah, absolutely.
which is an unusual one for sure. What about TV or cinema? Seen anything good?
Saw Captain Marvel at the weekend. Really good. Really enjoyed it. It's very Marvel-y. I think the Marvel formula, you'll know by now if you like it or not. I think it's great. I'm a big fan of the films. It doesn't bring anything particularly new, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it was a lot of fun.
And is it a must-see before Endgame?
Yeah, absolutely. Mainly because she's going to be in Endgame, and I think it's important to learn who she is before she turns up in it. So yeah, absolutely. What about yourself?
I went to see The Kid Who Would Be King.
Oh,
I took
nice.
my kids along to see that, and actually I thought it was really terrific. It's very much an old school kids adventure, but I think if I was 9 or 10 it would probably be straight in at number 1 in my favourite films list. So I'm not sure if it's still at the cinema, but I'd highly recommend it if not, because there's a lot in there for your inner kid, even if you're an adult as well.
Yeah, I've not seen that yet. That's on my list of. I'm hoping it's still playing in cinema, so I can go and see it.
Anyway, that's enough chat from us just now. We hope you enjoyed the first episode of the Page One podcast as much as we enjoyed recording it. And we'll be back next week speaking to Roz Watkins, who's the author of The Devil's Dice, another crime thriller, and also the author of Dead Man's Daughter, which is out very soon.
But we'll leave you with some more information about upcoming Page One launch, and see you guys next week.
See you.